In this topic, we'll look at who actually makes decisions in RWA protocols, how assets get approved, monitored, or shut down, and what happens in a crisis. We'll compare DAO-style governance to committees, and connect these choices directly to both risk and returns. When we bring real-world assets on-chain, governance has a different job than in pure DeFi. Here, code is not enough. We're trying to keep three things stable at the same time: preserve capital, keep returns reasonably predictable, and protect against a much wider set of risks. Think of governance as the operating system that coordinates lawyers, servicers, data providers, and token holders. Its mandate is to define who is allowed to do what, when, and with which checks, so the protocol stays resilient even when the real world gets messy. Every real-world asset that touches a protocol moves through a simple lifecycle. First, onboarding. You decide whether you even want this exposure. That means evaluation, due diligence, and agreeing on terms. Then monitoring. Once capital is at work, the job shifts to supervision. Are payments on track? Are covenants being respected? Do early warning signals show up in the data? Finally, offboarding. You shrink or close the position through scheduled repayment, active reduction, or some form of workout after trouble. Governance defines the rules, responsibilities, and triggers at each stage. Phase 1 is all about deciding which real-world assets are even allowed near the protocol. It usually starts messy. Originators bring raw proposals, often in their own formats and with their own narratives. The job of the risk and due diligence process is to translate that story into hard questions about track record, legal structure, and collateral. Once the team is comfortable, parameters are set, like maximum leverage, concentration limits, and covenants. Only then does the structure graduate to on-chain approval and actual capital deployment. In an RWA protocol, monitoring isn't about staring at spreadsheets. It's about building an early warning dashboard. You start by tracking NAV and payment performance frequently enough to notice small drifts, not just big blowups. Then you watch covenant indicators, leverage, liquidity buffers, and key compliance checks that signal rising risk. You also monitor concentration. Are you too exposed to one borrower, asset type, or geography? The governance goal here is simple: detect stress early, trigger conversations and parameter changes, and avoid irreversible impairment. When an RWA position stops being set and forget, you move into offboarding and workouts. The mild path is gradual de-risking. You shrink credit limits, tighten covenants, and let the position pay down over time. If stress increases, you move to negotiated solutions. That's where you restructure terms, maybe bring in a new servicer, or refinance the exposure. Only when these fail do you use enforced exits, trigger wind-down mechanics, enforce security interests, and ultimately liquidate collateral. When we talk about governance in RWA protocols, we're really choosing between two imperfect models. DAOs give you broad participation, strong transparency, and a sense that major decisions are politically legitimate. But they can be slow, noisy, and weak on technical depth. Specialized committees flip that. You get speed, accountability, and real credit and legal expertise. The trade-off is concentration of power and potential misalignment. That's why most serious RWA designs end up hybrid, trying to capture the strengths of both. To design RWA governance, think in terms of three org types that trade off speed, expertise, and transparency. At the top, DAOs are maximally transparent, but slow and often low expertise, so they're better for broad mandates and upgrades, not day-to-day operations. Expert committees sit in the middle layer. They move fast and bring deep domain knowledge, but introduce conflict of interest risk and depend on good reporting. Off-chain SPVs operate at the legal execution layer. They act quickly within a defined mandate and hold assets, yet are the least transparent. Robust protocols deliberately combine all three instead of overloading any single one. In RWA protocols, real stress tests happen during crises, not backtests. You don't want teams improvising when a borrower stops paying or a regulator intervenes. You want a playbook. First, every incident is classified fast: minor event or major crisis. That single decision picks the escalation path: standard ops, emergency protocol, or full legal action. Then, the legal terms must already support those actions. If enforcement isn't pre-negotiated off-chain, on-chain votes won't save you. When a covenant is breached or an off-chain data feed stops, you want a pre-agreed playbook, not a panic. Automation is the first line of defense. The protocol freezes new activity and switches to conservative assumptions, so nothing can quietly drift worse. Next, authority escalates to a small, specialized risk group with clearly defined emergency powers. They investigate, coordinate off-chain parties, and propose options. Finally, humans decide. Communicate with token holders. Choose between workout, wind down, or resuming activity, and then gradually unfreeze. Regulatory and legal shocks are less about if and more about when, so RWA design has to assume them. The first layer of defense is structural isolation. Each asset pool sits in its own SPV or trust, so a lawsuit or enforcement action can't easily drag down the entire protocol. The second is jurisdiction agility. Governance needs live visibility into sanctions and rule changes, and the power to pause or cap exposure by region. The third is having asset migration paths, so value can be rewrapped and relocated if a jurisdiction turns hostile. When you look at any live RWA protocol, you can mentally slice it into 3 inspection zones. Start at the DAO layer. Who actually controls parameters and emergencies? Are mandates clear? And do past votes show capture by a few players or genuine resilience? Then move to the legal layer. Are the SPVs or trusts truly bankruptcy remote? And who is contractually empowered to enforce liquidations off-chain? Finally, check the asset layer. How were assets underwritten? Who monitors covenants day to day? And is performance reporting timely, consistent, and independently verifiable? Real-world asset protocols work best as hybrid engines. They keep real-world capital and cash flows at the center, then wrap them with expert committees that handle underwriting, monitoring, and execution. Above that, a DAO provides legitimacy, transparency, and final oversight. As a builder, your job is to decide which decisions belong to code, which to expert committees, and which to the broader community.